Well, your two main show hosts here on Halftime have deep connections to the Great American Conference and Division II football. SmackDown is a graduate of Arkansas Tech University. I did 7 seasons of play-by-play for Henderson State. And so the cancellation of the Division II football season, certainly in the Great American Conference, hits kind of close to home for us here on Halftime. But it hits even closer to home for our next guest. He is the commissioner of the Great American Conference. Will Prewitt joins us on Halftime here from the GAC offices. Well, I wish we were talking under better circumstances, but it's good to talk to you again. How are you?
Hey, it's good to talk to you, Phil. Obviously, it's been better circumstances. It's usually 1,000 degrees in a cramped press box, but I would give anything to be in a 1,000-degree cramped press box this fall. Unfortunately, on Friday evening, we had to make the announcement that all GAC fall sports are suspended until December 31st. Moving forward, we've worked hard. Really proud of the efforts that our 12 campuses put forth to try to compete this fall. And unfortunately, the NCAA Board of Governors issued some directives through their Sports Science Institute that made it impossible for anyone in Division II or Division III to play. We were the last Division II football conference to make a suspension, and it hurt so much for our student athletes, our coaches, our communities. It's not 80,000 people that you get in an SEC or Big 12 game, but these are big events in our communities, and hurt for not just our football players, volleyball, soccer, cross country, golf, tennis, the whole spectrum of our student athletes that are losing the opportunity to compete this fall.
Well, I want to get into some of those the guidelines from the NCAA and why those were unworkable. But before we get into that, are the fall seasons postponed or are they canceled? Will these teams play in the springtime?
Yeah, we're using the phrase suspended at this point, and if nothing else, the pandemic has given the world a great reminder about suspended, canceled, all the fun differences there. Right now, we're saying suspended. There's some sports that we hope that we can have as much of a full season as possible. There are others. In football, that's really TBD. How do you handle a sport like football considering, and we haven't received any guidance from the NCAA yet, but assuming that we're back to a normal fall schedule, we kick off on the first weekend of September, and 2021 Division II football, you have 11 weeks to play 11 games. I don't know that we can ask our student athletes, how much can we feasibly ask a football player to play in the spring, knowing that you're going to turn around and have to play 11 games in 11 weeks in September. So all of that's TBD. The last, really since March 13th, when we had to shut things down the first time, when the world really started going crazy. It feels like it's a never-ending cycle of Zoom calls, teleconferences, and we've got a lot more of those to try to figure out, how do we give those graduating student athletes some sort of experience that's worthy to them and all of our student athletes for that point. But, can we go too far in affecting those student athletes going forward into fall of 2021? So still a million questions to be answered.
So the Board of Governors had canceled the Division II fall championships, and that factored into the decision for the GAC to suspend the fall sports. But there was more on top of that. There are these additional requirements that you had mentioned that that your school presidents and I think most other Division II, if not everybody, thought were unworkable. What were these expectations? What were the decisions that had been handed down by the Board of Governors that were so unworkable?
And Phil, the championships, honestly, I'm not sure that even impacted. If you want to play for championships, you've been a part of calling a Henderson State football playoff game. It's a great experience, but we were prepared, if necessary, to try to get in a full GAC fall schedule this year, even if there wasn't going to be NCAA Division II championships. That would have hurt, but we still would have felt good because we give our kids a chance to compete. The thing that was the absolute, death blow to our hopes to be able to compete this fall, the NCAA Board of Governors, the Sports Science Institute guidelines, all summer, all fall, well, not quite into fall yet, but all summer, those were guidelines. Testing requirements that to play not only a football game, to play a volleyball match or a soccer match, run cross country, you have to test those student athletes and have the testing results back within a 72-hour time frame of contests being played. Now, that's very, very unworkable in some of our communities. And beyond that, many of these Sports Science Institute directives, they conflict with what the CDC's come up with what the best practices in our states of Arkansas and Oklahoma, what they've come up with. It would be six-figure expenses, just to get in a partial football season, a partial volleyball season, and even getting in, I think there's some moral elements. Testing availability isn't quite what it should be in a rural community, possibly like Alva, Oklahoma, or Magnolia. So we would be taking these tests away from our communities where they're needed for symptomatic patients. And the testing component was huge, but the Board of Governors overreach with the liability that they're assigning to schools beyond not allowing waivers. And it's really interesting to see some of the possible lawsuits that may be out there with Big Ten parents. I've seen Tom Marr's name in connection with this. But the NCAA also wanted to make member institutions responsible for all out-of-pocket competition or all out-of-pocket expenses from a student athlete on a competing team. It's really hard to trace, where that exposure would come from, but that's an unbelievable legal liability that it would place our schools in. So when you factor all of those things, it's really frustrating. I would have loved for our institutions to have really been able, our plan, we delayed until September 28th. We're trying to get 12 campuses open safely again. Our athletic trainers, our coaches, our student athletes have worked hard all summer to follow guidelines and have guidelines in place that we've been able to do voluntary workouts without a lot of outbreaks. But we felt like if we could open our campuses, then we would have a very viable opportunity to play this fall. And these dictates from the NCAA basically took that decision out of our hands.
Speaking of Great American Conference Commissioner Will Prewitt here on Halftime. Will, you've seen different things like with the Southland Conference with UCA. They decided to postpone, I don't remember the exact wording, but postpone their fall season to the spring. But you've also seen via Twitter and different things like that where UCA has already scheduled some different opponents. They've already scheduled a game with Arkansas State. I believe they scheduled one with a school in Missouri. Is there a possibility where some of the GAC schools could look in that route and maybe something that's closer to me, graduated from Arkansas Tech, maybe rekindling the UCA-Arkansas Tech rivalry, mainly just to give the kids an opportunity to play the game? Or with what you've been mentioning, the directives from the NCAA, is that pretty much out the window at this point?
I really think from a realistic point of view, that's out the window from, we would have to get some answers on the liability pieces. There still would be the financial obligations, but the one piece we have in direct conflict to what you've seen with some of the Autonomy 5 conferences. Our folks have been, our athletic administrators, our presidents, they've been great. People have asked questions. We've tried to work through things, and every vote that we've had on an issue has been 12-0. And I don't think that anyone wants to step out on, well, maybe we're going to try to get a couple of contests in and but no one else gets any games. So, as much fun as it would be for a Arkansas Tech UCA football game, and I can already see my friend Sam Strassner, the voice of Arkansas Tech football, ready to run through a wall for that one. It's just not a realistic possibility for us.
Last thing before we let you go, just want to get your thoughts on you've talked a little bit about the NCAA. Do you feel that the NCAA has served its purpose properly over these past few weeks? We've talked extensively just kind of with Division I football, and I know there's a big difference between with Division II football with GAC and kind of with the Razorbacks and the SEC in Division I, but I feel like it's almost kind of been the same thing when you look at it across both ways. Do you think the NCAA has served its purpose properly these past few weeks from a GAC and Division II perspective?
To be perfectly honest, and this is an awkward spot for me. I'm a defender of the NCAA when people aren't in lots of cases. The people who work at the NCAA, 98% of those people bust their hind ends to make things good for our student athletes and running championships and working through eligibility issues. I'm a big fan of what the Sports Science Institute's done and work with concussions and so forth. But frankly, over the last couple of months and with what's came out in recent days, the NCAA Board of Governors, they failed all of us with the uncertainty that's been out there, with I believe some making guidelines into hard and fast policy in some ways as a knee-jerk reaction to a really kind of disastrous hearing in front of Congress. So I'm not sure that any of us have been particularly well served by the absolute senior leadership in Indianapolis.
I think a lot of people in college sports would agree with you these days. Well, we'll end it there. Again, I wish we were talking under better circumstances, but hopefully there'll be a full football season next year. GAC is such a great place for college sports.
Amen to that.
And it's a real bummer that the next few months won't have any. But, Will, appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Will.
Hey, guys, appreciate you.
You got this Will Prewitt, the commissioner of the Great American Conference, which will not be playing any sports for the next 3.5 months, just like the Pac-12.
It sucks because, like you said when we kicked this whole thing off, Division II sports is something that's near and dear to both of us. I lived it. You called it.
Hey, I mean, there might be more Division II athletes in this state than there are Division I athletes.
Absolutely. Oh, 100%.
And if you're somebody that loves the whole idea of, quote, playing for the love of the game, these Division II kids don't have any real – they might have dreams of going to the pros.
You play because you love it.
Realistic about it. That's right. All right, we'll wrap the show up. 3 up, 3 down. That's next.